John Tunstall was 24 years old when he gave Billy the Kid something no one else ever had: respect. Billy was 18, broke, and running from a murder charge in Arizona. Tunstall hired him anyway, paid him fair wages, taught him to read ledgers and handle business, called him "my boy" in front of other ranch hands. For 6 months, Billy worked honest for the first time in his life. Then on February 18, 1878, a posse of 4 men cornered Tunstall on a dirt road outside Lincoln, New Mexico. They shot him in the chest. Then they shot him in the head while he was on the ground. Then they killed his horse and laid it across his body. Billy found him 3 hours later. The men who killed Tunstall worked for the same people who'd been trying to run Tunstall out of Lincoln County for months. They had badges. They had the law on their side. They had powerful friends in Santa Fe. What they didn't have was any idea what they'd just created. Billy the Kid had killed before, but those were survival kills. Heat of the moment, self-defense. What happened after Tunstall died was different. Billy made a list. He wrote down every name of every man who was there that day or helped plan it. Then he started working through it, methodically, patiently, like a man with a job to do. In the next 6 months, he would kill or help kill 9 men from that list. He would start a war that would kill 60 people and burn half of Lincoln to the ground. He would turn the entire territory of New Mexico into a battlefield. And it all started because someone shot the only man who ever treated him like he mattered. John Tunstall came to New Mexico Territory in 1876 with money from his father's British merchant business and a plan to get richer. He was educated, ambitious, and young enough to think he could change things. He bought land, started a ranch, opened a store in Lincoln that sold goods cheaper than the existing monopoly. That monopoly was called The House, a store and bank controlled by Lawrence Murphy and James Dolan. The House controlled everything in Lincoln County. They set prices. They controlled the law through Sheriff William Brady, who owed them money. They controlled credit. If you didn't do business with the House, you didn't do business at all. Tunstall broke that rule. He partnered with a lawyer named Alexander McSween and a rancher named John Chisholm. Together they offered Lincoln County farmers and ranchers an alternative: fair prices, honest credit, competition. The House didn't tolerate competition. Murphy and Dolan started legal battles, filed false claims against McSween for embezzlement, got a judge to issue a warrant to seize Tunstall's assets. Then they armed a posse with badges and told them to bring in Tunstall's cattle and horses. But everyone knew what "bring in" meant. This was Lincoln County in 1878. The law was whoever had the most guns and the right piece of paper from the right corrupt judge. Tunstall knew they were coming for him. His friends told him to leave town. Hide until the legal mess got sorted out. He refused. He said he'd done nothing wrong and the law would protect him. He was 24 years old and still believed in things like justice. Billy the Kid tried to warn him. Billy had been on Tunstall's ranch for 6 months. He'd worked cattle, learned to handle money, eaten at Tunstall's table. Tunstall treated him different than anyone else ever had. Didn't call him kid like it was an insult. Didn't ask about the bodies he'd left in Arizona. Just gave him work and respect and talked to him like he had a brain. Billy wasn't used to that. Most people saw him as a criminal or a fool. Tunstall saw potential. When Billy heard the posse was riding out with arrest warrants that didn't make sense and guns they weren't planning to put away, he rode to Tunstall and told him to run. Tunstall smiled and said everything would be fine. He was wrong. February 18, 1878. Tunstall was riding back to Lincoln with 5 of his men. Billy the Kid was supposed to be with them, but Tunstall had sent him ahead with Dick Brewer to move some horses to safety. That decision saved Billy's life and damned everyone else's. The posse that was hunting Tunstall included Sheriff's Deputy William Morton, Deputy Jesse Evans, and 2 hired guns named Tom Hill and Frank Baker. They weren't lawmen. They were Murphy and Dolan's enforcers with badges pinned on. They'd been drinking. They had a warrant to seize property, not kill anyone, but they were carrying rifles and acting like men on a hunt. They spotted Tunstall around 5 p.m. on a road near Ruidoso Creek. Tunstall was riding with ranch hand John Middleton and 2 others. When Tunstall saw the posse coming hard, his men scattered into the trees. They yelled for Tunstall to run. He didn't. He stopped his horse and waited. Witnesses later said he thought he could talk his way out. Explain the law to them. Show them the warrants were fraudulent. Make them see reason. He still thought law meant something. Morton and Evans rode up fast. Tunstall raised his hand in greeting. Morton shot him in the chest. Tunstall fell backward off his horse. He hit the ground hard and tried to get up. Evans rode closer and shot him in the back of the head. Then they killed his horse and dragged it on top of him. Then they rode back to Lincoln and told Sheriff Brady that Tunstall had resisted arrest and they'd had no choice. Brady wrote it up as justifiable homicide. Case closed. Except it wasn't closed, because Billy the Kid found the body 3 hours later. Billy and Dick Brewer had finished moving the horses and were riding back to meet Tunstall when they saw Buzzard circling. They rode closer and found Tunstall on the ground with his horse across him. Billy got down and moved the horse. Tunstall's face was destroyed. The back of his skull was gone. His coat was soaked through with blood. Billy had seen dead men before. He'd made a few himself. This was different. This was the man who'd given him a chance, who'd paid him honest wages, who'd looked him in the eye and called him my boy like he meant it. Billy didn't cry. Witnesses said he went quiet, stared at the body for a long time. Then he said something that Dick Brewer remembered for the rest of his life. "I'll get every son of a bitch who was there." That night, Billy rode into Lincoln and went straight to Alexander McSween's house. McSween was Tunstall's business partner and the closest thing to a lawyer the opposition had. Billy told him what happened. McSween was devastated. He and Tunstall had been trying to build something legitimate in Lincoln County. Now Tunstall was dead, and the men who killed him had the law on their side. McSween wanted to file charges, go through proper channels, appeal to the territorial governor. Billy listened to all of it, and then said no. The law in Lincoln County belonged to Murphy and Dolan. Sheriff Brady had already ruled it justifiable. The judge was in their pocket. Filing papers wouldn't bring justice. It would just get more people killed. Billy had a different plan. He knew who was on that posse. He knew their names, where they lived, where they drank. He told McSween he was going to kill every man who pulled a trigger that day. McSween tried to talk him out of it, told him it would start a war. Billy said the war already started when they shot Tunstall. Now it was just a question of who'd be left standing at the end. Dick Brewer agreed with Billy. So did a dozen other Tunstall ranch hands who'd respected their boss and hated the house. They called themselves the Regulators. Technically, they were a legal posse, deputized by Justice of the Peace John Wilson, who was one of the few officials in Lincoln County not controlled by Murphy and Dolan. Their job was to arrest the men who killed Tunstall and bring them to trial. But everyone knew what arrest meant in Lincoln County in 1878. The Regulators were a death squad with paperwork. Their first target was William Morton. Morton knew he was in trouble. After the Tunstall killing, he'd gone into hiding at a ranch 60 miles from Lincoln. He figured if he stayed low for a few weeks, the heat would die down. He didn't understand that Billy the Kid wasn't going to forget or forgive. On March 6, 1878, the Regulators tracked Morton to the ranch where he was hiding. There were 11 Regulators. Morton had one friend with him, a cowboy named Frank Baker, who'd also been on the posse that killed Tunstall. The Regulators surrounded the ranch house. Billy called out for Morton to surrender. Morton knew what that meant. He and Baker made a run for it on horseback. They almost made it. They had fast horses and a head start, but the Regulators had numbers and fury. They chased them for 5 miles. Finally, Morton's horse gave out. He and Baker stopped, raised their hands, and surrendered. Dick Brewer, who was leading the Regulators, promised them safe passage back to Lincoln for trial. They had witnesses. They'd do this legally. Billy said nothing. He just watched Morton with eyes that made Morton ask to write a letter to a friend before they rode back. In the letter, Morton wrote that he didn't think he'd make it to Lincoln alive. He was right. They rode for 2 days. On March 9th, somewhere between Roswell and Lincoln, the Regulators stopped to make camp. Morton and Baker were under guard. Then someone, witnesses disagree who, said Morton tried to grab a gun. The Regulators opened fire. Morton and Baker died in seconds. So did a Regulator named William McCloskey, who some said tried to stop the execution and got shot for it. The Regulators rode into Lincoln and reported that Morton and Baker were killed while trying to escape. Technically, it was legal. Practically, everyone knew it was murder. Billy the Kid had crossed off 2 names. Sheriff Brady knew he was next. Billy had made no secret that he blamed Brady for covering up the Tunstall murder and protecting the men who did it. Brady was Murphy and Dolan's man. He wore the badge, but he took their money. He'd arrested Tunstall's men on fake charges. He'd ruled the Tunstall killing justified. He'd protected Morton and Evans. Now Morton was dead, and Brady knew the Regulators were coming for everyone on their list. He started traveling with deputies. Never went anywhere alone. Carried a rifle everywhere. It didn't matter. April 1st, 1878. Lincoln, New Mexico. Main Street, 9 a.m. Sheriff Brady was walking to the courthouse with 4 deputies. They were armed, they were alert, they were watching for trouble. What they didn't see was the regulators waiting behind a wall 30 feet away. Billy the Kid, Dick Brewer, and 4 others had positioned themselves behind an adobe wall with a clear view of the street. They'd been there since dawn. They had rifles, they had patience, they had a list. Brady walked past the wall. Billy stood up and fired. So did the others. 12 shots in 4 seconds. Brady went down immediately. He was hit at least 4 times. One of his deputies, George Hindman, took 3 bullets and died in the street. The other deputies ran. Billy and another regulator named Jim French jumped the wall and ran to Brady's body. They took his rifle and his pistol. Then they ran back behind the wall and disappeared into the maze of Lincoln's back alleys. The whole thing took less than a minute. 2 lawmen dead in broad daylight in the middle of town. Witnesses everywhere. No one tried to stop them. That killing changed everything. Killing Morton and Baker could be justified as frontier justice. They'd murdered Tunstall and everyone knew it. Killing Sheriff Brady was different. Brady was the law, corrupt or not. Killing him in the street made Billy the Kid and the regulators outlaws. The territorial governor issued warrants. The army got involved. Murphy and Dolan hired more guns and called them deputies. What had been a business dispute turned into a war. The violence escalated. The House hired a gunman named Buckshot Roberts to hunt the regulators. The regulators tracked him to Blazer's Mill on April 4th. Dick Brewer tried to arrest him. Roberts opened fire. In the gunfight that followed, Roberts killed Dick Brewer with a single shot to the head. The regulators killed Roberts, but it took 11 bullets to do it. The man who'd led the regulators was dead. Billy the Kid took over. For the next 3 months, Lincoln County turned into a battlefield. The regulators hit Murphy and Dolan's supply lines. Murphy and Dolan's men ambushed Tunstall's remaining business operations. Both sides burned ranches, stole cattle, killed anyone they suspected of working for the other side. The law was meaningless. It was just 2 armed gangs fighting over power and money and revenge. The body count climbed. Ranchers fled. Towns emptied. And in the middle of it all, Billy the Kid kept working through his list. The war reached its peak in July 1878, during what history calls the 5-day battle. Murphy and Dolan's forces, now officially deputized and backed by the U.S. Army, surrounded Alexander McSween's house in Lincoln, where the regulators had taken shelter. There were about 60 men on Murphy's side, about 15 regulators inside the house. The siege lasted 5 days. On the 5th day, Murphy's men set the house on fire. The regulators had a choice: burn or run. They chose to run. They burst out the back door firing. The street erupted in gunfire. McSween was killed in the first 10 seconds. So were 3 other regulators. Billy the Kid made it out alive. So did most of the others. They scattered into the hills. The 5-day battle was over. The House had won. The Lincoln County War was essentially finished. Except Billy wasn't finished. The regulators disbanded. Most of them fled the territory or took amnesty deals. Billy kept writing. He had names left on his list and nowhere else to go. Everything he'd built with Tunstall was gone. McSween was dead. The ranch was burned. The store was seized. All that was left was the list and the bodies he'd put on it in Tunstall's name. Over the next year, Billy would be credited with killing or helping kill at least 6 more men. Some were on the list. Some just got in the way. By the time Pat Garrett hunted him down in 1880, Billy the Kid had become exactly what Tunstall had tried to save him from: a killer with a reputation and a price on his head. But here's what matters. Billy the Kid wasn't born a legend. He was made into one. And the man who made him was John Tunstall. Before Tunstall, Billy was just another outlaw running from the law. After Tunstall died, Billy became something else. He became a man with a code, a man who kept his promises, a man who'd burned down half a territory to avenge someone who showed him kindness. That transformation happened in the 3 hours between when Tunstall was shot and when Billy found his body on that dirt road outside Lincoln. Historians still argue about Billy the Kid. Was he a cold-blooded killer or a product of a violent time? Was the Lincoln County War about justice or just greed? Did Billy really kill 21 men, or was the number inflated by dime novels? What nobody argues about is this: John Tunstall's murder created Billy the Kid as we know him. Before Tunstall, Billy was a nobody. After Tunstall, he was a legend. The murder didn't just kill one man. It unleashed something that changed the entire history of the American West. The physical evidence is still there. Tunstall's grave is in Lincoln, New Mexico. You can visit it. The courthouse where Billy killed Brady still stands on Main Street. The McSween house site is marked. The Blazers Mill where Dick Brewer died is a museum. These aren't legends. These are real places where real people died in a war that started because one man treated another man like he mattered. John Tunstall was buried 2 days after he was killed. Billy the Kid was one of the pallbearers. Witnesses said he didn't speak during the funeral, just stood there staring at the grave. After it was over, he rode straight out of town. 3 days later, William Morton was dead. 2 weeks after that, Sheriff Brady was dead. 4 months after that, half of Lincoln was burning. All because a 24-year-old British rancher decided to give an 18-year-old outlaw a second chance. That's the part that makes this story impossible to forget. It's not just about violence or revenge or the Wild West. It's about what happens when someone shows you kindness, and then that kindness is ripped away. Billy the Kid had killed before Tunstall, but those kills were survival. What he did after Tunstall died was different. It was personal. It was deliberate. It was a promise kept to a dead man who'd called him my boy. The Lincoln County War killed at least 60 people. It bankrupted the territory. It required federal intervention. It destroyed entire communities. And it started with one murder on a dirt road. John Tunstall thought the law would protect him. He thought justice meant something. He thought his money and his British connections and his legitimate business model would keep him safe from men like Murphy and Dolan. He was wrong. What actually protected people in Lincoln County in 1878 wasn't the law. It was having men willing to kill for you. Tunstall didn't believe in that. Billy the Kid did. Here's the final impossible fact. John Tunstall's murder turned Billy the Kid into a legend, but it also destroyed him. Everything Billy did after that day led directly to his death 3 years later when Pat Garrett shot him in Fort Sumner. If Tunstall had lived, maybe Billy would have stayed on the ranch, learned the business, become respectable, died old in bed instead of young on a floor. But Tunstall didn't live. He died on a road with a bullet in his head and his horse on top of him. And Billy spent the rest of his short life making sure the men who did it paid for it. The question isn't whether Billy the Kid was a hero or a villain. The question is what you'd do if someone gave you a chance when no one else would, and then someone killed them for it. Would you let it go? Would you trust the law? Or would you make a list and start working through it? Billy chose the list. It cost him everything. But it also turned him into a legend that's lasted 140 years. John Tunstall's been dead since 1878. Billy the Kid's been dead since 1881. But we're still talking about what happened on that road outside Lincoln. That's the legacy of kindness and violence and revenge in the Old West. You can visit Lincoln, New Mexico today. Walk the same street where Billy killed Brady. Stand in front of the courthouse where Billy escaped in 1881. Look at Tunstall's grave. These places are real. This happened. A 24-year-old man tried to do business honestly in a corrupt territory. An 18-year-old outlaw tried to go straight for the first time in his life. And when the corrupt men killed the honest one, the outlaw started a war that killed 60 people and became legend. That's the story. A man treated a boy like a son. 48 hours later, he was dead. And the boy spent the next 3 years making sure everyone knew what happened when you killed someone Billy the Kid loved.